There are various topics that I want to weave together today. My first thought was how to be wrong, especially in a world that wants to be so right about everything, and how that shows up in our relationships. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, just how hard it is for us to admit that we got something wrong, to say sorry. I have learned so much about this being a parent. And ultimately, what I think this all boils down to is just, it sounds really funny, but just like how to be human and how to allow ourselves to be compassionate with our entire humanity. And I was speaking with a client this morning, and I've never liked the term life coach. It really does not describe who I am. I'm not a traditional life coach. I don't do strategy and goals. And I'm much more of like a human coach or an emotional coach or, I'm looking for a title actually, because we need one. Not that I'm one for titles, but unfortunately we do live in a world where you need to have a title of some sorts to describe what you do. But really, I feel like my passion and my gift, you could say, is to really show people how to embrace their entire humanity. And if I bring a spiritual element into it, it's really about the union between the spiritual and the human. It's not about transcending the human. So I'm going to talk about all of these things today. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So the first word that comes up for me is humility. And I was listening to a part of a talk by Rupert Spira, and he was answering the question, what is reality? And so he really goes off on it. And someone then asked also, what is humility? And when he had finished, talking for about 20 minutes on what is reality, and he moved on to the question of what is humility, he said, humility is the ability to understand everything that I just shared. And, he's talking about existence and all of these really, complex, profound things. And I just thought, actually, to be human, to have this human experience, no matter what angle, like whether you have a spiritual outlook or, completely not, like just that this is what it is, and once we die, that's it. Like all perspectives are valid, right? But no matter what our angle is, humility is just, I think, really so essential to understand this human experience or to understand life. Because the thing is, humility, and this will tie into how to be wrong, humility is this, I think when we really settle into humility, it is this really beautiful kind of softened state of being where, how you might have heard this, like, the more you know, you realize you really don't know. And what is knowing, right? We live in a culture right now that society has gone bonkers, like the information over, it's like a dumpster of it, right? It's not beyond a dumpster. It's like a garbage pile. I say garbage pile because it's just like too much. We're in the age of over information, and it tends to be defined as what do you know intellectually, and can you prove it? And nowadays you have all, I don't even want to go into it. You have all ends of that spectrum. But it tends to be very mental and logical and left brain. And having studied a bit of brain spotting, like our frontal neocortex, the thinking mind, the logical, rational mind is such a small part, an essential part, but a very small part of our brain, and actually how much really resides in the deeper brain and how many beautiful qualities there are in the right brain, which we don't really use in our current society. And so it's interesting, these like, binaural beats and all of these different methods that use really syncing the left and right hemisphere. And everything to me is about coming back into balance, coming back into harmony, the inner masculine and feminine, the right and left brain. Where there, it's funny because Rupert Spira talks about non-duality, but we do live in a very dualistic realm. So anyway, I don't want to go too off piece, but humility is really coming into a state of, maybe it's curiosity. The curiosity to not know, and also knowing that to know is not just something that comes from the brain, most especially the neocortex. That knowing is also a deeper sense of a felt sense. There's a bodily knowing and wisdom. There's an emotional knowing and wisdom. There's an energetic knowing and wisdom. Like, we are so much deeper and vaster than we give ourselves credit for. And so humility is kind of softening into all of these aspects of ourselves, and we might have wisdom and we might have knowing. We absolutely do. And I think this is an important piece, especially in a society that's like, you don't know, and we're going to tell you what you should know. That actually understanding what our inner knowing is and our inner wisdom and intuition is a very important tool to have to navigate life, and knowing that this is our experience to have. So many tangents I could go off on today because it's so vast. But then equally, and it sounds really contradictory, and this is the paradox of life, because there's always two sometimes very opposing, contradicting things, equally going, well, I don't know, because then that keeps us in that, what they call the childlike state of curiosity, where you're open to exploring new things. You're open to things being different. You're open to having your perspective changed. I had a powerful brain spotting session with someone yesterday where, when they really dropped into it, it was something that had come up, many times, but all of a sudden they saw it from a different angle, with a different perspective. And it's like, those are the aha moments in our life, when we can look at something that has been there, that we know, but all of a sudden we look at it from a different angle and it changes everything. And that's where humility and, being humble with our human experience and softening, not being hard, not being rigid, not being linear, not being like we know it all and it's fixed and it's never going to change. No, that life experience and being human is fluid. And it needs to be given the space to be fluid, to ebb and flow and grow and evolve and alchemize and transform and all of these things. It's a living, breathing experience. It's not stagnant. It's when we're stagnant that we get into trouble. And so when we can soften enough and be humble enough within our experience and drop into that beautiful place of humility and curiosity, that's when perspectives can change, which ultimately is going to liberate us. See, we think that having control over something is going to make us feel safe, and that's a total illusion. Control is like a grip, and that always comes from fear. And when we're driven by fear, we will never feel free. And I believe that we all want to feel free to one degree or another, because that's our natural state of being. I believe that we are free spirits, and I believe that we're innately compassionate, kind-hearted, loving beings. And fear and control, make us do wild things. And then, a certain kind of vanity. And here, I'm gonna get a little bit, technical, esoteric at the same time. I don't like to use the word ego, because it has a lot of connotation. And the moment we label something and we have a definition for it, it becomes very, we have a projection of it and we have a judgment of it. So I like to say I like to call ourselves like the human. The human is the human part of us. And this is my perspective. You might not agree with it, but I believe that we're innately spiritual beings. And so there's this union, this partnership, this dance between this spiritual being that is having this experience with the human part of us. And sometimes, we can have practices where we connect more to the essence of who we are, our spiritual being, if you want to call it that. And we can really experience the oneness and the unconditional love and compassion because that is our true nature. And then equally, we have our human experience where we can judge and get hurt and be wounded and, criticize and, feel insecure and get jealous. And that's like the human part of us. And sometimes I find in the spiritual community, especially, there's a tremendous amount of judgment towards the human self. And I think that there needs to be a lot of redefining, recalibrating our relationship to being human, not as something that's bad and that's less than, that's lower than, and a lower frequency, and, transcend the human ego and bypass, the spiritual bypassing. I don't agree with that perspective, because we're here having this human experience and there's so much to learn. There's so much to enjoy about being human. And I think, this was something that was coming up in the conversation as well with a client, that I was making this point that we can also put spiritual teachers, gurus, kind of anyone these days through social media on a pedestal and believe that they're greater, better, wiser, they know more. They might very well have wisdom. They might very well have a breadth of experience that they're sharing with you. But do not forget that they're still human. I think we are coming out of a paradigm and an era where we put people, organizations, dogmas, philosophies, ideologies, beliefs on a pedestal and made them better than we are. And the thing is we're all human. And so there can be this expectation or this, projection, and then a disappointment when we realize, oh, that guru made a mistake. God, they're only human. Yeah, like they were always human, and letting go of that projection and letting go of that expectation, and equally letting go of putting yourself as lesser than and them as greater than. And I mean, gurus, we've seen it, right? Gurus, priests, teachers can be terribly corrupt and, take terrible advantage of people. And I like the phrase came into my mind back in 2020 that we need to move out of this triangular hierarchical system into the system of the circle, which is really we are all part of the same circle. Maybe from a soul perspective, some of us are older and have been around the ring more than once, right? Been around the sun multiple times. And some of us might be younger in spirit, but we're all in the same circle, having this human experience, learning, growing, becoming more humble through the process. And we're here to support each other, guide each other, teach each other, learn from each other, but just getting out of this hierarchical kind of pedestal culture. I mean, you see it so much with celebrities, and I just think, wow, that is the biggest illusion, of this person just because they look beautiful and they're on the big screen and they're famous, or, now on Instagram with these influencers and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers, and, oh, they must be better because of that. No, they're just human as well. So coming back to humility and how to be wrong. This might seem like a bit of a tangent to go into how to be wrong, but actually I know for myself, so I said that I've learned so much about this being a parent. And, I'd love to be a parent where I could say, oh yeah, I'm always peaceful and grounded and super present and loving and compassionate and patient with my daughter. And, I never raise my voice and I never get I'm human. I don't know anyone that can do that, or the people that I know that through friends of friends that are like that with their children, they go into the other room and have a moment and don't doubt for a second that your child isn't going to pick that up, And we're not here to show our children how to be perfect human beings. We're here to show our children how to be human. That's my intention, at least. It might not be yours, and that's fine. There's no one right way, right? I don't want to ever assume that I have the right way and that's it. There are many paths, right? I can only share from my experience and from the path that I'm walking, and you can take it or leave it, as always, as I will always say, as feels right for you. Trust yourself, trust your own being. So, but for me, I feel like my intention is to show my daughter what it is to be human. So what that looks like is, sometimes I get stressed or frustrated and I kind of lose the plot for a moment with my daughter. We bump heads or we get into an argument. But what I've learned is sometimes in the moment I can catch it and go, sorry, you know what, sweetheart, I'm just really stressed right now. Or, when you behave this way, yeah, I find it challenging or I find it annoying, and, I'd really appreciate if we can collaborate, but I'm sorry, like when I raise my voice in that way, that must not feel very good for you. I'm sorry about that. And can you understand where I'm coming from? So it becomes a conversation. But to model saying, I'm sorry, you know what? Like the way that I showed up in that moment wasn't the best. And also I'm human. And sometimes I catch it in the moment. Sometimes we'll have bump heads and have a clash and a little argument, in the morning driving to school. And then when I pick her up, I'll go, you know what, sweetie, I just really want to apologize for this morning. And I can see the moments when I do that with her, how she softens and then becomes so incredibly empathic. And that is so beautiful. Like that, you see, that's the thing, is we get to learn what empathy is when we learn to be human and have humility and say, I'm sorry, it's not even that I was wrong. It's just that I'm taking self-responsibility for my behavior and how that might have had an effect on her. And knowing that that's okay, like we're going to have those human moments. We're not always perfect. And equally, for her to be able to recognize how her behavior has an effect on others, how it has an effect on me. So I think when we're in relationship, when you put it into a romantic context, I mean, this can go for anything. It can be with friends, with family, with your children. But, romantic relationships I focus on a lot because they are like our greatest teacher and our greatest trigger. And we have the most, opportunity to heal should we choose. But it's really easy to just get into this like, I'm right, you're wrong, or, to get into defense attack mode and to become enemies rather than really being in collaboration. And what I find what I talk about most when I'm working with couples is that we're not actually really being vulnerable. We're being very self-protective. All of our coping mechanisms come in. And that's why it's really important to understand what your triggers are, what they look like, how do you cope when they come up, so that you can understand each other's language of who you kind of the blueprint of who you are and how you function. And it's really, really healthy to understand what that is and what that looks like, so that when it arises, we can change the pattern. We don't have to go into that triggered survival mode and just repeat on loop the same kind of dynamic arguments, all of that stuff. So, in a partnership, in a romantic partnership, what often happens is that there are two truths, there are two experiences, both valid, both based off of their own individual triggers and woundings and hurts and past experiences and different coping mechanisms, all of that stuff. But what happens is you're in the same room, but you're not actually connected and you're not conversing with each other. And you're sometimes just trying to prove your point. You're not actually in conversation most of the time when you're triggered. You're just both having this big experience, and it can feel kind of lonely because you're in the same room, but you're not understanding each other. And so to kind of be, to say something like, oh, I was wrong. Or to, in that moment, have the humility or actually the vulnerability to just say, this is what's actually going on for me on a deeper level, requires that we have, firstly, the ability to be present. And then what I spoke about last week is that we have cultivated self-awareness so that we can actually be the witness of what's going on, in our human experience in that moment. And then there is this, there's this beautiful point of connection that can happen when we drop into that vulnerability, when we can say, maybe I was wrong about that. Or again, I'm putting it under that label, but it's really just to go back to like, can we look at that same experience from a different angle? Or can we look at that experience not from the superficial, but to go deeper into it and go, okay, this is what's actually happening for me. I think I listened to another snippet of a video on a reel of this woman saying, why is it so hard for people to admit that maybe they were wrong? Is because people are so afraid of having their intelligence threatened, that if we admit that we're wrong about something, that we misunderstood something, that we didn't get that, we didn't see it from, maybe the correct lens in that moment, to say that we were wrong and we made a mistake threatens our intelligence. And because we're so attached to our intelligence, it's like an identity, the killing off of an identity is just like, can be humiliating for someone to say I was wrong and I didn't get that right, because then I'm going to come across stupid. And we just have to get out of that frame of thinking that we make that association that to say I made a mistake means that you're stupid. No, the most intelligent people can make a mistake. The most intelligent people can be manipulated. The most intelligent people can be persuaded into thinking something that, maybe didn't have the best of intentions. And it doesn't mean that they're stupid. And so we've got to detach and unravel and, pull apart all of the knots that we have this connotation. Because then that means that we can never really be in that beautiful state of humility and openness and receptivity and connection and curiosity to learn and grow. Because it's like, no, if I say that I'm wrong and I made a mistake, then you're going to think I'm stupid and I cannot do that because I need to save face. Then we're forever going to be kind of hard on the outside and constantly needing to try to prove ourselves and prove our position and prove that we're right. And look at the world when that happens. Everybody's just constantly arguing and in division and in aversion and in a fight. And it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to look at. It's not pleasant to feel. And I'm sure it's not pleasant to be in. So I just find with this human experience, it's really, humility is such a powerful word to really soften into our human experience and have so much compassion for it. And that requires us to accept all parts of it. We are not perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, right? But nobody's perfect. Nobody's happy all the time. Nobody's positive all the time. Nobody always has the answers, And I put my hand up that, of course I've had my own stubborn moments where I think I'm right, and maybe I have been right or you've been right, but also it's how we approach it. And can we be open to other people having different perspectives and having their own, oh God, no, I'm not even going to go into truth because that's a whole other topic. And that has a lot of different connotations as well these days. But I guess it's just to be humble enough to be in our humanity and be in the presence of somebody else's humanity. And we're all just trying our best. We're really all just trying our best. And sometimes we get scared, and sometimes we defend, and sometimes we attack, and sometimes we judge. And, can we have compassion for all of these things? So I think when I go back to partnership, having that humility to just be present and vulnerable as much as possible to really see the human in the other person, not our expectations, not our projections, not who we want them to be, not even who we want ourselves to be in that sense of I need to be right and I need to be perfect and I need to have my shit together and I need to, we have so much fear of making a mistake and being wrong and the implication of that. We need to redefine all of that. We're human, we make mistakes, that's okay. Doesn't mean that we're less worthy. Doesn't mean that we're not good enough. Doesn't mean that we're less lovable. I really feel like we're moving into a time, and this is where I feel like my service to humanity is to go, it's okay for you to be human. And all that entails, all the colors of that spectrum, all the shades, the dark and the light equally. They all deserve to be loved. They all deserve to be held. They all offer us such deep wisdom and teaching. We can learn so much from our humanity. And from my spiritual perspective, that's when the soul thrives, because it's like, oh yeah, I get to learn and grow through this wild, crazy, weird, bonkers experience of being human, which is sometimes exquisite and sometimes excruciating. And it's all of that. It's all of that. And we're learning to just be in the experience and lean into it and soften into it and surrender into it and trust the whole process. Just trust it. I'm going to leave it at that for today. I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to leave it at that and just plant the seed and just notice if, okay, what is my invitation for you today? Notice how you can soften into your experience with humility, knowing that you don't need to know everything, and have that childlike curiosity and drop into your heart. And notice if you can see other people through the lens of heart. Notice their heart. Notice their humanity. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's almost no words for it when you can just drop into the experience, into that state of being. And really what it is can you allow yourself to be receptive to just taking that all in? And if you find that you're hardening, you're tightening, you're constricting, you're judging, whether it's you or someone else, take that as an invitation. Like, oh, okay. Am I scared? Like, does some part of me feel threatened right now? Be present with it. Stay with it. Feel it. Breathe into it. Love it. Listen to it. This is how we discover what humility is, by just being present and curious and going, what is this showing me? What part of me needs healing? What part of me do I need to still learn about? And then just be curious. Yeah. All right. Leaving it at that. Loving you all from afar. And as always, take it or leave it as feels right for you. And wishing you a beautiful day or evening if you're off to sleep. Bye. Loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.